Today we finish up with the third part, and today we're going to talk about humility. Humility. If you want, this is the three-legged stool. Justice, kindness, humility. The stool only stands when those three legs are underneath it. These might be considered the Holy Trinity of the Old Testament: mercy or kindness, justice, and humility. Now, humility is often a word we think about when we think about its opposite: somebody who thinks they're better than someone else, somebody who is full of pride, who boasts all the time. I don't want to think about humility in those terms today. What I want us to think about are a series of ideas about humility that I think Micah is getting to. Humility is a posture of laying yourself down before someone else. When you're speaking to them, you are laying yourself down before. Humility is a listening ear rather than a speaking tongue. Humility is a need to regularly check in with others, to just check in. Humility is a sense that I don't have all the answers, or perhaps more importantly, humility is a sense that I, Graham Baird, cannot figure out everything on my own. I need others. Humility is an attitude that other perspectives aren't just a nice nuance of life, but they are a necessary need for our souls. Humility is all of these things. As we've talked about racial oppression, economic oppression, there is geographic oppression, there is gender oppression. There is someone in your life who is oppressed in some way. And I believe that what God is calling Christ followers to do now is to walk humbly with that person. And as we close, and we began with the LA Dodgers, may they rest in peace, I want us to think about the most famous Dodger in history. At the time, not the LA Dodgers, but the Brooklyn Dodgers. And that, of course, is a man by the name of Jackie Robinson. Actually, his real name was Jack Roosevelt Robinson. But of course, Jackie Robinson is famous today because he is the first African American to break the color barrier. What I want to focus on now, though, is one of the ways that Jackie Robinson was able to do so is because there were people in his life who had skin color more like yours and mine, who walked humbly with him. And I just want to lift up a couple of these characters who basically made it possible for Jackie Robinson to survive. The first person was the guy who hired him, and the guy by the name of Branch Rickey. This is Branch Rickey, who played baseball at the University of Michigan. He also was a coach at Michigan, but Branch Rickey was a devout Methodist. And it was a part of his faith that he would stand up to those who were racist around him, and he would stand up for Jackie Robinson. And he would say this at one point in his life: I may not be able to do something about racism in every field, but I can sure do something about it in baseball. Now, once Branch Rickey invited Robinson into the game, it was not easy for Robinson, but continually Branch Rickey stood up for, he walked alongside Jackie Robinson. The other person would be his manager, a guy who was a bit of a foul-mouthed cuss, as many baseball managers can be, but his name was Leo Derosher. This is Leo Derosher, who walked into the locker room one day when all of his white players were about to boycott the team, and he said to them, I don't care if the guy is black. I am the manager of this team, and I say he plays. Now, the exact quote is a lot more colorful than that, but since this is a church service, let's leave it at the abbreviated version. Jackie Robinson would not have been able to stay on the team without Leo Derosher. And then there was a famous character by the name of Pee Wee Reese. You may have seen the movie 42, and I cannot recommend that movie more highly, but in the middle of the movie, you remember Pee Wee Reese putting his arm around Jackie Robinson as Jackie Robinson was having racial epithets spewed at him from the stands, and basically by putting his arm around him, which would later become a famous statue, he was supporting Jackie. But he always said of Jackie Robinson, he said, you can hate a man for many reasons, but color is not one of them. Now again, we need to carefully lift up these people who are of Caucasian descent as exemplars carefully, because we do not want to use them as mechanisms to assuage white guilt or to minimize the terrible atrocities of racism that continue in this country. But what these figures did is to walk humbly with Jackie Robinson. And so as I close today, I just want to ask you this question: who are you walking humbly with in your life? Who are you humbly walking with in your life? Somebody in your life needs you to walk humbly with them. And God wants you to lay yourself down before that person, to listen more than speak. He wants you to check in with that person. I'll just finish with a couple of quotes from Jackie Robinson as we close. Here's one of my favorite quotes. It was said towards the end of his career, but he said, "Life is not important except in the impact that it has on other lives." And as Jackie Robinson is laid to rest in a cemetery, there in a shady part of this cemetery in Brooklyn, there is his tombstone. Life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives. God wants us to have an impact, and we can by walking humbly with those who are oppressed and with your God.